No one would miss you if you disappeared. The words echoed in Meera's mind as the carriage rattled toward the Lycan king's fortress. Her aunt had said them casually, carelessly, like commenting on the weather. And the worst part was that Meera knew they were true. 24 years old, and she had no one. Her parents had died when she was 6, a house fire that had taken everything except her. She'd been passed from relative to relative after that, each one more reluctant than the last, until she'd landed with Aunt Helene and Uncle Bernard. They hadn't wanted her either, but they'd kept her for the work she could do. 18 years of cooking, cleaning, mending, and being reminded daily that she was a burden they tolerated only out of obligation. Now even that tolerance had run out. The Lycan king demands tribute, Uncle Bernard had announced a week ago. Every noble house must send something of value. We're sending you. Meera hadn't argued. What was the point? She had no money, no skills beyond housework, no one who would advocate for her. And her aunt's parting words had made it perfectly clear how little her absence would matter. No one would miss you if you disappeared. The fortress loomed ahead, dark stone walls rising against a grey sky. It looked like something from a nightmare. Towers and battlements and shadows that seemed to move on their own. The stories said the Lycan king was a monster. 400 years old, they whispered. Teeth like knives, eyes that glowed in the dark. He'd killed 1,000 men in battle and felt nothing. Meera wondered if he would kill her quickly or slowly. She hoped for quickly. The carriage stopped. Guards in black armor opened the door, their faces hidden behind helmets. One of them gestured for her to follow, and she did, climbing down on legs that trembled despite her best efforts to stay calm. The inside of the fortress was warmer than she'd expected. Torches lined the corridors, casting flickering light across stone walls hung with tapestries. She saw servants moving through doorways, heard distant sounds of life. Voices, footsteps, the clatter of kitchens. It felt almost normal. The guards led her up a winding staircase, through a heavy oak door, and into a chamber that stole her breath. It was beautiful. High ceilings painted with stars, walls of deep blue velvet, a fireplace large enough to warm the entire room. Windows looked out over snow-capped mountains, and the furniture was rich dark wood, polished to a gleam. And standing by the window, his back to her, was the Lycan king. He was tall, impossibly tall, broad-shouldered and powerful even in stillness. His hair was dark, falling past his collar, and when he turned to face her, his eyes were the silver of winter moonlight. Meera dropped to her knees immediately, pressing her forehead to the cold stone floor. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," she whispered. "I know I'm not. I know I'm not what you expected. My family sent me as tribute, and I understand if I'm not acceptable. You can send me back, or dispose of me however you see fit. I won't resist." Silence. Long, stretching silence that made her skin crawl. Then footsteps, approaching slowly, and she squeezed her eyes shut. "Look at me." His voice was deep, resonant, but not cruel. She raised her head just enough to peer up at him through her lashes. He was crouched before her, bringing himself down to her level. His silver eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her want to shrink back, but there was no anger in them, no disgust, just curiosity, and something else she couldn't name. "What's your name?" "Meera, Your Majesty." "Meera." He said it slowly, like he was tasting the word. "Why do you think you need to be acceptable? What do you think tribute means?" She didn't understand the question. I. My uncle said every noble house must send something of value. They sent me because I have no other use. I'm meant to serve you however you require. Something flickered in his silver eyes. However I require. Yes, Your Majesty. Whatever you want from me, I'll provide. I won't fight. I won't complain. She swallowed hard. My aunt said. She said no one would miss me if I disappeared. So it doesn't matter what happens to me here. The air in the room changed. She could feel it. A tension, a pressure, like the moment before a storm breaks. The king's jaw tightened, and his hands, resting on his knees, curled into fists. Your aunt said that to you. It wasn't a question, but Meera nodded anyway. She told you that no one would miss you, that you could disappear and the world would simply continue. Yes, Your Majesty, it's true. I have no friends, no family who cares, no one who would notice if I would. The words cut through her rambling, sharp and certain. Meera blinked. What? I would notice. He reached out, and his fingers caught her chin, tilting her face up to meet his gaze fully. His touch was gentle despite the strength she could feel in his hands. I would miss you. You don't even know me. I know enough. His silver eyes held hers, unblinking. I know that you were sent here by people who should have protected you. I know that you've been told you're worthless so many times that you believe it. I know that you walked into this room expecting death and accepted it without a fight. Her eyes burned. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall. Those things don't make me worth missing, she whispered. They make me pathetic. No. His voice was firm. They make you brave. They make you strong. You've survived things that would have broken lesser people, and you're still here, still standing, still breathing. His thumb brushed across her cheek, catching a tear she hadn't realized had escaped. That matters. You matter. She shook her head, unable to accept it. I don't understand. Why are you saying these things? What do you want from me? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he released her chin and stood, extending his hand toward her. Come, he said. Let me show you something. She took his hand. What else could she do? And let him pull her to her feet. He led her to the window, positioning her so she could see the view spread out below. Mountains and forests, and, in the distance, the glittering lights of a village. Do you see that? He asked, standing behind her. All of that is mine. The lands, the people, the villages and farms and forests. I've ruled this territory for 400 years. I've seen generations born and die. I've watched empires rise and fall. I don't understand what that has to do with me. Everything. He turned her gently to face him. In 400 years, I've learned to recognize what matters. Wealth doesn't matter. I have more than I could spend in 1,000 lifetimes. Power doesn't matter. I have enough to destroy kingdoms if I wished. What matters is people. Connections. Finding someone who sees you truly and chooses to stay. Her heart was pounding. Are you saying? I'm saying that the moment you walked through that door, something in me recognized something in you. His silver eyes were soft now, almost vulnerable. I'm saying that your aunt was wrong. You are not disposable. You are not forgettable. And if you were to disappear, his voice roughened, I would spend the rest of my very long life searching for you. Meera stared at him. This had to be a trick. A game. Some cruelty she didn't understand yet. Why? She asked. Why would you search for someone you just met? He smiled. and it transformed his face from intimidating to almost gentle. Because you're mine, Meera. I've been waiting for you for 400 years. He took her hand, raised it to his lips, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. And I promise you, no matter what happens, no matter what lies you've been told, someone would miss you. I would. I will. Always. She didn't believe him. She couldn't. A lifetime of being invisible, unwanted, unnecessary had taught her better than to hope. But standing there in the firelight, her hand in his silver eyes holding hers with an intensity that stole her breath, she felt something crack open in her chest. Something small and fragile and terrified. Something that wanted, desperately, to be wrong. His name was Kale. She learned it an hour later, sitting across from him in a smaller chamber adjoining the grand one where they'd first met. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light across plates of food she couldn't quite bring herself to touch. Roasted meat and fresh bread and vegetables in rich sauces, more than she'd seen in months. "You're not eating," he observed. "I'm not hungry." "You're lying." He said it without accusation, simply stating a fact. "When did you last have a proper meal?" She looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. "I don't remember." "Meera!" Something about the way he said her name made her look up. His silver eyes held hers, steady and patient. "Eat," he said. "Please. No one is going to take it from you. No one is going to punish you for wanting more." How did he know? How could he possibly understand the way she'd learned to make herself small, to take only scraps, to never ask for seconds because asking meant being reminded how much of a burden she was? She reached for a piece of bread, tore off a small portion, and put it in her mouth. The flavor exploded on her tongue, butter and warmth and something she couldn't name. She had to close her eyes against the sudden sting of tears. "Good," Kale said softly. "Take your time." They sat in silence while she ate, slowly at first, then with increasing appetite as her shrunken stomach remembered what it was to be full. He didn't rush her. He didn't comment. He simply watched with an expression she couldn't quite read. When she finally pushed her plate away, pleasantly full for the first time in years, he leaned back in his chair. "Now," he said, "let me explain what's happening here." "You said I was yours, that you'd been waiting for me." "Yes." "I don't understand what that means." He was quiet for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "Lycans have what we call fated mates. One person, chosen by fate or the gods, or some force beyond our understanding, who is meant to complete us. We spend our lives searching for them. Some find their mates quickly. Some search for centuries." His silver eyes held hers. "I've been searching for 400 years. Her heart stuttered. "And you think I'm—" "I know you are. I felt it the moment you entered the room. The pull, the recognition, like finally finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing." Meera shook her head. "That's impossible. I'm nobody. I'm nothing special. I don't have any skills or beauty or—" "Stop." His voice was firm but gentle. "I'm not going to sit here and listen to you repeat the lies your family taught you. They're not lies, they're facts. My entire life, everyone who was supposed to care about me has made it clear that I'm a burden, a mouth to feed, an obligation to be endured." Her voice cracked. "You can't just decide that's not true because you felt some pull when you looked at me." "You're right. I can't decide it." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But I can show you." I can prove to you, day by day, that you are worth more than you've been taught to believe. I can give you time to see yourself the way I see you." His jaw tightened. "And I can swear to you that I will never, never treat you the way they did." She wanted to believe him. That was the terrifying part. After 24 years of learning not to hope, she wanted so desperately to believe that this man, this ancient, powerful king, could be different. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "If I'm your mate, what does that mean? What am I supposed to do?" "Whatever you want." He sat back. "Stay. Rest. Heal. Let yourself be cared for without expecting a price." He paused. "And if you decide you don't want this, if you decide you'd rather leave, I'll let you go. I'll give you money and protection and a new start somewhere far from here." "You'd let me leave? Even though you believe I'm fated to be yours?" "I believe the bond is real. But I also believe that bonds mean nothing if they're not chosen." His silver eyes were fierce. "You've never had a choice in anything, Meera. Your whole life, things have been decided for you. Where you'd live, how you'd be treated, what you were worth. I won't be another person who takes your choices away." She stared at him. In her entire life, no one had ever offered her a choice. No one had ever considered that her wants might matter. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "I've never been allowed to want things." "Then we'll figure it out together." He stood and crossed to a door on the far side of the room, opening it to reveal a chamber beyond. A bedroom, she realized, with a proper bed piled high with blankets and pillows. "These are your rooms, connected to mine, but separate. You can lock the door if you want. I won't enter without your permission." "My rooms." She stood, walking slowly toward the doorway. The bedroom was beautiful. Soft colors, warm lighting, a window overlooking the mountains. It was more space than she'd ever had to herself. "I've never had my own room before." "You do now." He stepped aside to let her pass. "There are clothes in the wardrobe. A bath can be drawn whenever you want. If you need anything, anything at all, you can call for the servants, or you can come to me." She stepped into the room, running her fingers across the soft bedding. It felt like a dream. Any moment now, she would wake up in her cramped corner of her aunt's house, and none of this would be real. "Kyle." His name felt strange on her lips, intimate somehow. "Why are you being so kind to me?" He was quiet for a long moment. When she turned to look at him, he was leaning against the doorframe, watching her with an expression that made her chest ache. "Because someone should have been kind to you a long time ago," he said. "And because I meant what I said. If you disappeared, I would miss you. Not because of the bond, not because of fate, but because in the hour I've known you, I've seen more courage and resilience than most people show in a lifetime." "That's not courage. That's just surviving." "Surviving is courage." He straightened, preparing to leave. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, if you're willing, I'd like to show you the grounds. But only if you want to. Only ever if you want to." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Meera stood alone in the beautiful room, surrounded by more comfort than she'd ever known, and tried to make sense of what had happened. This morning, she'd been sent away like garbage. Tonight, she was in a palace, being treated like she mattered. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. She crossed to the bed and sat on its edge, sinking into softness that felt almost sinful. The fire crackled. The room smelled of cedar and something warm she couldn't name. She thought about Kyle's words. "Someone would miss you." I would. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever implied that her existence mattered to them, that her absence would leave a gap in the world. It was probably a lie. It had to be a lie. But lying in that soft bed, warm for the first time in longer than she could remember, she found herself hoping, against all her better judgment, that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't. The nightmare came on the fifth night. Fire. It was always fire. The orange glow creeping under her bedroom door, the smoke filling her lungs, the sound of her mother screaming somewhere far away. She was 6 years old again, small and helpless and paralyzed with fear, watching the flames lick closer and closer while the world burned around her. She woke, gasping, her heart slamming against her ribs, her skin slick with sweat. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The room was dark, the shadows unfamiliar, and she scrambled backward against the headboard, searching for something solid to hold on to. A knock at the connecting door. "Meera?" Cale's voice, rough with concern. "I heard you scream. Are you all right?" She couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts that weren't nearly enough. "I'm coming in." A pause. "Unless you tell me not to." She wanted to tell him not to. She wanted to be strong, to handle this alone, to not need anyone. But the darkness was pressing in on her, and the smell of smoke was still thick in her nostrils even though there was no fire, and she couldn't stop shaking. The door opened. Cale crossed to her in 3 strides, and then he was sitting on the edge of her bed, his silver eyes searching her face in the dim light. "Nightmare?" he asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Can I touch you?" The question surprised her, the asking of it, the waiting for permission. She nodded again, and he reached out, his hand settling warm and steady on her shoulder. "Breathe," he said. "You're safe. You're here with me. Nothing can hurt you." She focused on his voice, on the weight of his hand, on the silver of his eyes in the darkness. Slowly, her breathing steadied. The phantom smell of smoke faded. The shaking subsided to a fine tremor. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to wake you." "Don't apologize. Not for this. Not ever for this." His thumb traced small circles on her shoulder through the fabric of her nightgown. "Do you want to tell me what you were dreaming about?" She should say no. She never talked about it. Not to anyone. Not ever. It was the thing she kept locked in the deepest part of herself, the wound that had never healed. But something about the darkness, about his patience, about the way he looked at her like she mattered. It loosened her tongue. "The fire," she said quietly, "the one that killed my parents." Cale went very still. "Tell me." "I was 6. It was the middle of the night, and I woke up because the house was full of smoke. I could hear my mother screaming, calling for my father, and I wanted to go to her, but I couldn't move. I was so scared." Her voice cracked. "By the time they found me, a neighbor, someone who saw the flames, it was too late. The whole house was gone. They said my parents never made it out of their bedroom." "Meera, the worst part isn't the fire." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't seem to stop talking. "The worst part is that I survived. I've spent 18 years being passed from relative to relative, being told I was a burden, being reminded that I should be grateful for scraps and corners because at least I was alive. And sometimes—" She choked on a sob. "Sometimes I wonder if it would have been better if I'd died with them." The sound Cale made was almost a growl, low, pained, furious. Before she could process it, he was pulling her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. "Don't say that," he said roughly. "Don't ever say that." "It's true. No one wants me. No one has ever wanted me. I'm just I'm just taking up space that someone else could use better." "You are not taking up space." His arms tightened around her. "You are not a burden. You are not disposable. The people who made you feel that way were wrong, cruel and wrong and undeserving of you. You keep saying that. You keep saying I'm worth something. But how can you know? How can you possibly know when everyone else in my entire life has told me the opposite?" He pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, tilting it up so she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "Because I've lived 400 years," he said, "and I've learned to see people for who they really are, not who they've been taught to be. And when I look at you—" His thumbs brushed away her tears. "I see someone extraordinary. Someone who survived impossible loss and 18 years of cruelty and still has the capacity to hope. Someone who walks into a monster's fortress expecting death and faces it with dignity. I'm not extraordinary. I'm broken." "No." His voice was fierce. "You're not broken. You're wounded. There's a difference. Broken things can't be fixed. But wounds can heal. And I swear to you, Meera, if you let me, I will spend every day helping you heal." She stared at him through tear-blurred eyes. "Why? Why do you care so much about someone you barely know?" "Because you're mine." He said it simply, certainly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. And because—" His voice softened. "Because I know what it's like to be alone, to wonder if anyone would notice if you disappeared. I've spent 400 years feeling that way. And then you walked through my door, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone anymore." Her breath caught. "You've been alone? But you're a king? You have everything." "I have lands and wealth and power, but until 5 days ago, I didn't have anyone who saw me, the real me, not the crown or the title. I didn't have anyone who would miss me if I vanished." His forehead pressed against hers. "Now I do. Now I have you." "Kyle." She didn't know what to say. She didn't have words for the enormity of what she was feeling. "You don't have to say anything." His breath was warm against her lips. "You don't have to decide anything tonight. Just know that you matter, that you've always mattered, that the people who taught you otherwise were blind and cruel and desperately, unforgivably wrong." She didn't know who moved first. Maybe she leaned in. Maybe he did. But suddenly his mouth was hovering a breath away from hers, and her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. "Tell me, and I will." She should tell him to stop. It was too fast, too much, too terrifying. Instead, she closed the distance between them. The kiss was soft, softer than she'd expected from someone so powerful. His lips brushed against hers like a question, like a promise, like something sacred. His hands cradled her face like she was precious, and she felt something inside her crack open. All the walls she'd built, all the armor she'd worn, shattering under the weight of his gentleness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, he pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay with me tonight," he said. "Not for anything more than this. Just stay. Let me hold you. Let me remind you that you're not alone." She should say no. She should protect herself, keep her distance, Remember that hope always led to disappointment. Instead, she nodded. He shifted them both until they were lying down, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her. The fire crackled softly. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear. "I would miss you," he said into the darkness. "Every single day for the rest of my very long life. Don't ever doubt that." She didn't answer, but as she lay there, warm and safe and held for the first time in 18 years, she felt something she'd thought was dead stir back to life. She was falling for him. Against all logic, against all self-preservation, against everything she'd learned about the cruelty of hope. She was falling, and she couldn't seem to stop. 2 weeks of happiness, 2 weeks of learning what it meant to be valued, to be seen, to matter to someone. Meera had started to believe it might last. Then her aunt and uncle arrived. She was in the library when she heard the commotion, raised voices in the entrance hall, the clatter of boots, a woman's shrill tone that made her blood run cold. She knew that voice. She would know it anywhere, in her nightmares and her waking hours alike. Aunt Helene. For a moment, Meera couldn't move. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to make herself small, to become invisible the way she had learned to do over 18 years of survival. But then she heard Cale's voice, low and dangerous, and something else stirred inside her. She walked toward the entrance hall. The scene that greeted her was almost surreal. Aunt Helene stood in the center of the marble floor, her face pinched with barely concealed greed. Uncle Bernard lurked behind her, his eyes darting around the opulent surroundings with naked avarice. And facing them, his back straight and his silver eyes blazing, was Cale. "Simply here to check on our niece," Aunt Helene was saying, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We've been so worried about her. Family concern, you understand?" "Family concern?" Cale's voice was flat. "You sent her to me as tribute, telling her to expect death, and now you claim family concern?" "A misunderstanding. We never meant—" "You told her no one would miss her if she disappeared." Silence fell like a blade. Aunt Helene's face went pale, then red. "I don't know what lies she's been telling you, but she told me the truth." Kyle took a step forward, and both Meera's aunt and uncle flinched backward. "She told me about the cellar where you made her sleep, the scraps you fed her, the 18 years of being told she was worthless, a burden, something to be tolerated rather than loved." "Now see here," Uncle Bernard started. "I haven't finished." Cale's voice dropped to a growl that echoed off the marble walls. "You sent her here, hoping I would dispose of her for you. You wanted to be rid of her without the inconvenience of guilt. Instead, you gave me the greatest gift I've ever received." That was when Aunt Helene spotted Meera standing at the edge of the hall. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. Then her expression shifted into something that might have passed for warmth if Meera hadn't known better. "Meera, darling, there you are. We've been so worried." She started toward her, arms outstretched. "Come, let's get you away from this place. We never should have sent you here. We've come to take you home." Meera stood frozen. The old instincts were screaming at her. "Obey, comply, don't make waves." 18 years of conditioning didn't disappear in 2 weeks, no matter how much she wanted it to. "Meera." Cale's voice, soft but steady. "You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to go." Aunt Helene's mask slipped. "She belongs with her family. We have a legal claim." "You have nothing." Kyle moved to stand beside Meera, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "She's not property to be claimed. She's a person, and she gets to choose." Choose? Aunt Helene laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. She doesn't know how to choose. She's never made a decision in her life. She's weak and stupid and completely incapable of— Stop. The word came from Meera's own mouth, surprising everyone. Herself, most of all. Aunt Helene blinked. What did you say? I said stop. Meera's voice was shaking, but she forced herself to continue. I've spent 18 years listening to you tell me what I am. Weak, stupid, worthless. A burden no one would miss. She took a breath. And I believed you. I believed every word, because I didn't know any better. Meera, I'm not finished. The words came stronger now, steadier. You took a grieving 6-year-old who had just lost everything, and instead of loving her, you broke her down piece by piece. You made me believe I deserved nothing, that I was nothing. Her hands were clenched at her sides. But you were wrong. Aunt Helene's face twisted with fury. You ungrateful little— I am grateful. Meera cut her off. I'm grateful that you sent me here. I'm grateful that you were so eager to be rid of me, that you handed me to someone who actually sees my worth. I'm grateful that your cruelty led me to kindness. She turned to look at Kale, and the pride in his silver eyes made her heart swell. I'm staying, she said clearly. Not because I have no choice, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I choose to. I choose him. I choose this life. I choose to be with someone who would actually miss me if I disappeared. The silence stretched. Then Aunt Helene's face contorted with rage. You think you're something special now? You think he actually cares about you? You're nothing, Meera. You've always been nothing. The moment he tires of you— Get out. Kyle's voice was ice. Get out of my fortress, get off my lands, and never come near her again. If I so much as hear your names in connection with Meera, I will destroy everything you have. Your reputation, your wealth, your lives. He smiled, and it was terrifying. And I have 400 years of practice at destruction. Uncle Bernard grabbed Aunt Helene's arm and dragged her toward the door. She went, still sputtering, but the fight had gone out of her. Within moments, they were gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Kyle turned to her, and his expression shifted from cold fury to something unbearably tender. You were magnificent, he said. Meera was shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her through was fading, leaving her trembling and raw. I can't believe I did that. I've never stood up to them. To anyone. You did more than stand up to them. He stepped closer, his hands rising to cup her face. You chose yourself, Meera. After 24 years of being told you didn't matter, you finally said that you do. Her eyes burned. I do matter. Don't I? Yes. His voice cracked on the word. More than you know. More than I can express. I love you. The words tumbled out before she could stop them, raw and terrifying and absolutely true. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how. But I love you, Kyle. And I choose you. I'll always choose you. For a moment, he was perfectly still. Then he made a sound, something between a growl and a sob, and his mouth crashed down on hers. This kiss was nothing like the gentle one they'd shared in the darkness. This was fierce, claiming, a declaration of everything he felt. His arms wrapped around her, lifting her off her feet, and she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had tilted on its axis. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his silver eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you, he said roughly. I have loved you since the moment you walked through my door, expecting death and facing it with more courage than warriors twice your size. I will love you until the stars burn out and the mountains crumble to dust. He pressed his forehead to hers. You are my mate, my heart, my home. And I swear to you, I will spend every day of forever making sure you never doubt your worth again. I believe you, she whispered, and for the first time she actually did. He kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. And standing there in his arms, surrounded by more love than she'd ever imagined possible, Meera finally understood the truth. Someone would miss her. Someone did miss her. Every moment they were apart. And she would never be alone again. The bonding ceremony was held on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. It was tradition, Kale had explained. Lycan bonds were sealed in darkness, a symbol that even in the deepest night, mates would always find each other. The ceremony would be witnessed by the pack, by the court, by everyone who mattered. And for the first time in her life, Meera would matter too. She stood before the mirror in her chambers, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at her. The gown was silver, the color of Kyle's eyes, flowing like liquid moonlight over her curves. Her dark hair had been woven with tiny crystals that caught the candlelight like captured stars. Around her throat hung a pendant of white gold, shaped like a crescent moon. She looked like a queen. In an hour, she would become one. A soft knock at the door. May I come in? She smiled at Kyle's voice. Isn't it bad luck to see the bride? I've waited 400 years for you. I'm not waiting another hour. The door opened, and he stepped inside, already dressed in his formal black, and stopped short when he saw her. His silver eyes went wide. Gods above. Is something wrong? Wrong? He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands coming up to cup her face like he couldn't help himself. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I'm trying to remember my own name. She laughed, a real laugh, bright and free. Laughter came easily now. Joy came easily. After 24 years of surviving, she was finally learning how to live. Kyle, she said softly, I need to tell you something before the ceremony. Anything. 3 weeks ago, when I arrived here, I expected to die. I thought that was what I deserved. To disappear, to be forgotten, to become nothing. She reached up and covered his hands with hers. You saved me. Not just my life, my soul. You made me believe I was worth saving. You were always worth saving. His voice was rough. I just helped you see it. I love you, she said. I will love you for as long as I live. And I want you to know, if I could go back and change anything about my life, I wouldn't. Because every terrible moment, every cruel word, every night I spent alone and afraid, it all led me here. To you. He kissed her then, soft and reverent, like she was something sacred. Let's go get married, he murmured against her lips. The great hall was transformed. Thousands of candles lined the walls, their flames reflected in mirrors until the entire room seemed to glow with golden light. The court had gathered in their finest, nobles and warriors and pack members, all watching as Meera walked down the aisle toward the man who had changed everything. The ceremony was ancient, spoken in the old tongue of the Lycans. Vows of protection and partnership, of running together through darkness and light. When Kyle slid the ring onto her finger, a band of silver set with a single moonstone, she felt something click into place inside her, like the final piece of a puzzle she'd been trying to solve her entire life. I now declare you bound, the officiant announced. King and queen, mates and partners, from now until forever. Kale kissed her, and the hall erupted in cheers. The feast that followed was magnificent. More food and wine and music than Meera had ever experienced. She sat at the high table beside her husband, her king, and watched as guest after guest approached to pay their respects. Then a messenger arrived with a letter. Kyle read it first, and a slow smile spread across his face. He handed it to Meera without a word. It was from a merchant in the Southern Territories, a detailed account of her aunt and uncle's fall from grace. Word had spread about how they had treated their niece, about the lies they had told, the cruelty they had inflicted. The noble families who had once associated with them now refused to acknowledge their existence. Their business had collapsed. Their reputation was in ruins. And at the bottom of the letter, a single line. They have been reduced to living in a tenant's cottage on the edge of their former lands, the same cottage where they once housed their servants. Meera read it twice, waiting to feel satisfaction, vindication, triumph. Instead, she felt only a quiet kind of peace. They spent 18 years trying to make me small, she said softly, and now they're the ones who have become nothing. Justice, Kale said simply. Long overdue. I used to dream about this, about them being punished for what they did to me. She set the letter aside. But now, I don't need their suffering to feel whole. I already have everything I need. He took her hand and raised it to his lips. What do you need? You. She smiled at him. Just you. That night, in chambers that were now truly theirs, Kale loved her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. And when she loved him back, fierce and unafraid and completely herself, she finally understood what it meant to be cherished. Not for what she could give or what she could endure, but simply for who she was. I love you, she whispered in the darkness afterward. I love you, he answered, pulling her closer. More than 400 years of loneliness. More than I knew I was capable of feeling. 3 years later, Meera stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the sun rise over the mountains she now called home. So much had changed. She had learned to read, to write, to navigate the complex politics of court. She had established a refuge for abandoned children, a place where no child would ever be told they were worthless, where no one would ever hear that no one would miss them. She had become the queen Kale had always believed she could be. And in her arms, wrapped in soft blankets and blinking sleepily at the dawn, was their son. He was 6 months old, with his father's silver eyes and his mother's dark hair. They had named him Ash, for the fire that had taken everything from her, and for the new life that had risen from the ashes. Kale appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around them both. You're up early, he murmured. I wanted to watch the sunrise. She leaned back into his warmth. I used to hate mornings. They meant another day of being invisible, unwanted, alone. But now, she smiled. Now I can't wait to see what each new day brings. And what does today bring? You, our son, this life we've built. She turned in his arms, looking up at the face she loved more than anything in the world. Everything I never dared to dream of. He kissed her forehead, then their son's. Do you remember what your aunt told you when they sent you to me? She said no one would miss me if I disappeared. She was wrong. His silver eyes held hers, so profoundly, completely wrong. I know. Meera smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who had finally learned her own worth. Because you told me the truth that very first day. You said you would miss me, and you've proven it every day since. I would miss you, he said softly. I will always miss you, every moment we're apart. You are the center of my world, Meera, the reason my heart beats, the answer to 400 years of searching. She thought about the girl she had been, broken, invisible, convinced that her existence didn't matter, and she thought about the woman she had become, loved, powerful, needed. Her aunt had been right about one thing. Meera had disappeared. The scared, silent girl who had walked into this fortress expecting death was gone forever. In her place stood a queen, a wife, a mother, a woman who knew with absolute certainty that she was worth missing. I love you, she said. I love you, he answered, forever and always. They stood together as the sun rose higher, their son cradled between them, and Meera finally understood the truth that had taken her 24 years to learn. She had never been nothing. She had never been worthless. She had simply been waiting for someone to see her, for someone to choose her, for someone to speak the words she'd needed to hear her entire life. Someone would miss you. I would. And now, finally, she believed it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new tale of love, fate, and discovering that you were always worth missing. Until next time.